Namaste, Namaskaram, Vanakkam, Namo Namaha, Jai Ganesha. Please visit our website at classicalyoga.org. And there's a donate button if you'd like to help us out. Here are some thoughts on some typical questions and statements that Hindus may encounter when dialoguing with a monotheist, especially a Christian. First and foremost, Christians are obviously trying to prove the existence of God and Jesus. Now remember, some Christians see them as, in a sense, different, and some see them as exactly the same. But the main point there for Hindus is to, number one, define God. Remember, this is an Anglo-Saxon word that didn't exist prior to 1500 years ago, and it refers to, quote, a one male, as opposed to goddess, a one male creator being noun, end quote. So very simply, it's kind of game over, because to date no one has ever proved that there is one male creator being noun, or female creator being goddess. And certainly if this God was omnipotent or almighty, and omnipresent, all-present, and all-knowing, omniscient, certainly it would be extremely easy to provide this proof of a one male creator being. As far as Jesus goes, historically there probably was a Jewish rabbi whose name was Yeshua, and remember this was changed along with his religion to Jesus the Christian, if you will. And apparently this Jewish rabbi was killed 2,000 years ago. Other than that, any other statement is simply an inner feeling or inner experience within an individual, but certainly nothing that can be proved. And of course, God must be a father, a man, because he had a son. Now here's where it gets very strange. So Jesus is simultaneously called the Son of God by most, and then by others God himself, which proposes a very interesting scenario. So if Jesus is God, then he gave birth to himself through a woman who was already married to another man. That's about as kinky as it gets. And as far as the virgin birth goes, of course, come on. What doctor would sign off on that? What parent would accept a daughter coming home and saying she was with child? And of course, Yeshua, Jesus had brothers, so how does that work? Talk about sibling rivalry. So they had a mother and a father, yet their brother Yeshua, he was a direct emanation from God, who is also himself. So again, it goes back to the greatest story ever told, in a sense. In other words, the greatest fabrication ever told. And of course, as Jesus' supposed return again, is this not the third example within Christianity of reincarnation, the Hindu belief of reincarnation, samsara? Obviously, first, this is God born in a human earthly body, reincarnation 1, killed on a cross, resurrected, reborn again, reincarnation 2, and then reincarnation 3, coming back again. So here is the point where metaphors are used, similes are used, analogies are used, inferences are used, but inference must really be preceded by perception. So one has to recognize these are simply assumptions, the beginning actually of the scientific method. Simply the initial stages of belief as assumption, never carrying it through to actual proof and conviction, or the initial stages of hope, never carrying it through to a guarantee. So here are some of these initial beliefs, unproved, and initial hopes or faiths. So it's often pointed out that everything is designed, so there must be a designer. Again, we can prove who designed certain material things, but again, the burden of proof is on then who was this designer God. But design is actually the outcome of natural selection, of survival of the fittest. If plants and animals didn't figure out through time how to survive by redesigning themselves, there just would be no life, so game over. Natural selection, evolution, survival of the fittest is really the basic understanding of why there is life at all. If there were no life, we wouldn't even have this discussion. Of course, when people bring up the notion of design, does that imply that all design is good? Because obviously anybody who's ever spent significant time in the natural world knows that it can be anything but good. It is extremely difficult. Mother Nature, if you will, is a stern taskmaster. And often these cliches are used by those who really have lived a rather cushy life and have never spent a lot of time in nature, which is something interesting to contemplate. If many Christians are so infatuated with Jesus, why don't they do what he did? Try to go off and live in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights and see how your prayers are answered. See how beautiful a design you think everything is. And obviously there's all kinds of beautiful design in the universe, but also many designs that are highly detrimental, to say the least, or just outright confusing. One comic said, considering the human body, who would actually design an entertainment platform and a sewage platform in the same space? And clearly humans have changed the design of their own bodies, as well as obviously plants and animals. So does this mean that the original designer was not as perfect as one thought? This also gets into the area of miracles, when many say they prayed to God and they were healed, or one of their family or friends were healed. But what about the person who doesn't even believe in God and also was healed or got well? And what about the person who prayed to another deity and got well? Here's where I'd like to interject a story. As a young monk traveling through India, a few of us were standing on a corner in a busy street in Chennai, and we happened to notice that a school bus had broken down across the street. And the bus driver got out, opened up the hood, tinkered around, went back in, the bus wouldn't start, went back out again and tinkered around, and then came back in, and the bus did start. And it just so happened that one of the Indian boys in the area had been listening and came over and told us what was actually going on. So the bus was a group of Indian Christians, and the bus driver stalled out the bus and told all of the passengers, young children on board, that they had stopped, and so he went out to see what was wrong. And when he went under the hood, he disconnected the battery cable, went back inside, and kept trying to turn the bus over, and obviously it wouldn't start. So he said to all of the Indians there, and many of them were just recently being indoctrinated into Christianity, but still had strong Hindu leanings. And so the bus driver said, let's all pray to one of your deities, Shiva. Let's all pray to Shiva and see if the bus will start. Obviously, he keeps cranking and the bus is not going to start. So then he walks out, reconnects the battery wire, closes the hood, comes back in and says to all the naive children on the bus, let's try an experiment. Why don't we try praying to Jesus and see if the bus starts? So obviously, the bus started. So obviously, if this God is so almighty, all-present, all-knowing, why does one need to use trickery? Now, the Christian may point to the fact that there are causes in the universe and effects. So therefore, everything must have a cause. Every effect must have a cause, i.e. God. But an easy retort to that is that then there must be multiple causes in the world or in the universe, so there must be multiple gods. Of course, then the reply is, well, that the ultimate one cause was God, again, totally unprovable, where one asks then, well, then who caused this God? And the reply to this is generally, well, this God is an uncaused God. So in the first argument, if everything has a cause, how can there be an uncaused cause? And again, for those who insist that there must be this uncaused God, for again, in the sense of the miracles, one prays to God and one person is healed. But perhaps one forgot the many times when they prayed and they weren't healed. What about when sporting teams, they pray to have God on their side? So does this mean that God then plays favorites, is discriminatory between healing one and not another, between letting one side win and not another? And in the case of both sides praying to God, well, obviously there was a favoritism going on there. What about all the slaves, for example, who prayed and they were never released from their bondage? Was God a racist? For remember that many races held slaves, so this simply wasn't a white-black thing. And when it became to women being totally subjugated to men for many centuries, was then God a sexist as well? This God is clearly homophobic, according to the fundamentalist Christian viewpoint, and also anti-tattoo. Here's something to think about. So, obviously, the Jewish Rabbi Yeshua seems to have been nailed onto a cross, and they seem to carry over this stigma in seeing bloody holes in the hands, which brings to mind a very interesting story, a real occurrence that happened years ago at what's called the Crystal Palace in California, headed by the late Robert Schuller. And he was giving a sermon one day, telling everybody that we all need to really be discriminative towards the real Jesus, because he was giving a sermon one day, and this young man with long hair and robes and a beard walked up and claimed to the pastor that he was Jesus. To which Robert Schuller quickly replied, "Show me your scars." So this is the litmus test for a resurrected Jesus coming back, still looking exactly the same, still perhaps speaking Aramaic. So kind of a humorous situation. Just imagine that if this Yeshua, the Jewish rabbi, happens to come back, which obviously this has been predicted ever since he was killed. So if he happens to come back and he's in his original form, he'd be speaking Aramaic, would have no clue what anybody else was saying. And do you really think he would have any idea what this Christianity is that has been created after his death? And clearly, if this resurrected Jesus comes back, who's he going to come back to? Certainly he's not going to come back to the Hindus or the Buddhists, but even within Christianity, what if he comes back to the Pope, to the Catholic Church? All the Protestants cry foul, and vice versa, as well as innumerable sects within Protestantism. And back to the dark-skinned people, the slaves, if you will. I wonder how many realize that there was a slave Bible. Published in 1807. Quote, "The slave Bible, also called the Negro Bible, is one of the most powerful examples ever witnessed of manipulation using a controlled narrative. The fact that the Christian faith, a religion one-third of the world relied on to bring comfort, spiritual rest, peace, and salvation, was the narrative being controlled makes the slave Bible the ultimate propaganda tool and the greatest lie ever told. So the slave Bible, which was compiled by Emmanuel Rafa, so while we all enjoy a good story, truly on closer examination, the Christian Bible, as well as the Torah, the Quran, these are the greatest stories ever told in the sense of lies. Now, it is not to say that there are not a lot of good things there too. And this is where, as religious people, we should learn to come together and appreciate the good parts, taking care of each other, humanity, selfless service, clothing, feeding people, giving people shelter. This is all the good parts of religion. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just get rid of the exclusive doctrines in any religious tradition. Because people are people. There are, for example, Hindus who have a very superstitious mindset, who misuse the word God and Lord all the time. But it becomes their God, who is the creator of all things in their minds, such as God Vishnu or God Shiva. You see how this is not only the same monotheistic mindset, but actually really confuses and takes very superficial the word God. So it just becomes anything that anyone wants it to be. So where does a more mature mind come down on all of this? Why not try to just go with what we know? All for advocating finding a religious, spiritual path that works for one and following it. But let's get rid of the superstition. We can keep the meaningful stories. That's wonderful. The power of symbolism. Use that to enhance our everyday life. But let's go with what we do know. We all know we're humans here with a body, mind, and emotions. Why not take care of those? But as far as an inner essence, which many would call the spirit or the soul, we Hindus call it the Atmana, there is this inner essence that is a provable experience of pure energy, of light, inner light, illumination, and the feeling of lightness as opposed to depression, and an innate feeling of love. These are inherent qualities that we all have, all humans have, and many of the animals as well. Certainly the energy and the light. And some do express a very strong emotion of love and bonding. So whereas the monotheistic religions use the word soul to mean psyche, coming from the Greek and Latin psyche, which means the mind. So they're still trying to know, think about it, know eternity, know an uncaused cause, know an absolute through the mind itself. Doesn't work. We can get pretty far with the mind, but it has limitations. And this is why as Hindus we use the word Atmana, which literally means not the mind. Now we're entering into a realm, a deeper realm of pure experience. And we can all experience this inner energy, which Hindus call Shakti, this inner light, which Hindus call Jyoti, and the feeling of lightness. Unless you don't think you have inner light, well, you have dreams, you have imaginations, pictures in your head. If there were no inner light, we would not be able to see those pictures. And also, it's an optical delusion, in a sense. When you look at the sun, close your eyes, and you do see inner light there. Or when you stare at a candle and then you close your eyes. So this is a nice meditation discipline. But there may come a time when one closes their eyes, and actually you can do this by pressing on the optic nerve and you'll see white light on the inside. But there may come a time when one just closes their eyes and sees perhaps a soft moon glow light at the third eye point with their eyes closed, or maybe other colors. So the inner light is a reality, and the feeling of lightness, and also the feeling of just pure love, which is that. It is just a pure feeling that really can't be expressed in words, doesn't need to be, but then is expressed in our actions. But the pure experience is just that, and you know it when you feel it, and you know it, in a sense, when you don't feel it. So all of us can have this direct experience. We call this sakshat in Hinduism, having the direct experience of this inner essence of love and light and energy with a body, mind, and emotions. Now, there are some that in deep meditation have had an out-of-body experience and actually feel this as a separate body, if you will, looking down on the physical body, which obviously still has the mind and emotions there. So with experiences like that, one as an individual can deduce that, yes, there is a separate soul body that's temporarily inhabiting the body, mind, and emotions. But this Atmana body, if you will, more accurately, can and will actually leave the physical body. Now that's something that may be just speculation to some, and that's okay, that's wonderful to think about. But again, just go back to the basics of right here and now. There's an inner essence of love and light and energy. And doesn't it make sense to experience more of that in a positive way? Because we can do it also in a negative way. That's why we often say young souls. Because a young soul, if you will, can misuse their energy. They can use the light to blind someone. And the love can be a very selfish, unrefined love. So a thinking person finally realizes that, well, it makes more sense in life to have more positive energy. That's why everybody has their tea and coffee in the morning. It makes more sense to feel light as opposed to heavy, down, depressed. And the feeling of love is a wonderful feeling to have often. So we realize that we are that inner being, that inner essence of love, light, and energy, right? And respect how that is specifically spoken of in the different religions of the world. In the Hindu yoga religion, which we consider the Hindu yoga religious, spiritual, scientific, philosophical lifestyle, we call this inner essence the Atmana of love, Ananda or bliss, and pure energy, Shakti, and also Chid, and then pure consciousness, Sat. So it's Sat, Chit, Ananda, pure consciousness, a pure energy of light and knowledge, and a feeling of bliss, Sat, Chit, Ananda, which is also Jyoti, Shakti, Ananda, Shanti, light and energy and a loving peace. What if all of us as humans could just exemplify more of that love, light, and energy to ourselves, to our body, mind, emotions, and then to our fellow human beings? And then we would truly create a more divine experience here on earth rather than wondering about assumptions about a deities that are the creator of all things, having serious conflicts over whose book, all written by humans, obviously, is the one book, whose savior is the one savior, whose deity is the one deity. All suppositions, all assumptions that only produce conflict and actually seem to be tools of trying to prove one's superiority, produce more power, greed, anger, and all those negative human characteristics that we're supposed to be trying to eradicate by being a religious person. So no matter who we are, what we believe, why don't we do the best we can to experience our inner essence of love, light, and energy, take care of our body, mind, and emotions, and then help our fellow human beings. And send out good thoughts to them. Wish them well, wish them an auspicious life, wish them peace, wish them a full life, wish them tranquility. And seek a peace that comes through understanding. Om, peace, peace, peace. As the Hindus would say, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.